Deep in the highlands of Ethiopia, preserved in monasteries, untouched by time, lies a prophecy so old, so dangerous, that every other branch of Christianity tried to bury it. This prophecy was not lost by accident. Its removal was deliberate, precise, and absolute. For centuries it remained sealed inside texts, copied by hand, guarded by monks who believed the world was not ready to face what it revealed. Today, after nearly 2,000 years hidden from the Western world, its message has resurfaced. And if what it predicts is true, the entire timeline of Christian history past, present, and future has been wrong since the beginning. This prophecy begins long before the rise of Rome, long before the councils that shaped the modern Bible, and before doctrine and politics drowned out the voices of early believers. It describes a moment when heaven itself would withdraw from the earth, not because humanity fell, but because a specific event shattered the original spiritual covenant. According to this ancient text, the world we live in today is not the world God intended, but a temporary detour, a shadow age that would last until a sign reappeared, a sign the prophecy claims only Ethiopia would preserve. And that sign, it warns, has begun to stir again. The prophecy speaks of a silent cycle, a span of ages in which divine communication would cease, prophets would vanish, and the heavens would remain closed. Unlike the Western canon, which focuses on moral decline as the reason God stopped speaking, the Ethiopian version states something far more unsettling. The silence was planned. It was written into the fabric of creation as a countdown. The prophecy claims that before the final age begins, humanity must rediscover the texts that were intentionally removed, because without them, the final warnings cannot be understood. In astonishing detail, the prophecy reveals that powerful councils in the early centuries of Christianity debated whether this text should survive. They feared how its revelations challenged the structure and authority of the emerging church. So the prophecy was suppressed, replaced by a cleaner narrative that ensured unity, obedience, and control. But Ethiopia refused. The ancient priests argued that no human institution had the right to silence a message written before nations existed. And so, while the rest of the world forgot it, Ethiopia continued to copy it, chant it, and guard it. At the heart of the prophecy lies a single declaration: the end will not begin where men expect. This is the line Western theologians found too dangerous. While most traditions focus on Israel as the epicenter of the final events, the Ethiopian text insists the first sign would rise from a land described as the keeper of the forgotten covenant. Scholars now believe this refers unmistakably to Ethiopia, home of the Ark traditions, the Book of Enoch, Jubilees, and dozens of ancient scriptures older than the Western biblical canon. According to the prophecy, a hidden witness would emerge from Ethiopia at the threshold of the last days. Not a person, but a text one, that would be rediscovered and recognized only when the world entered a period of unprecedented confusion. The prophecy describes this era with chilling accuracy: nations divided, truth buried under noise, and faith reduced to spectacle. Only in such a world, it says, would humanity finally be desperate enough to hear the message it once rejected. The prophecy recounts that humanity would misinterpret signs, misread symbols, and follow narratives crafted by earthly power. It warns that the end would be recognized not by wars or kingdoms, but by the return of the first voice, a voice spoken before the flood, before the prophets, before the ages. This voice refers not to a person, but to an ancient pattern of revelation found only in the oldest manuscripts. For centuries, only Ethiopia preserved this concept through liturgies and ancient scrolls the outside world never saw. One of the most dramatic claims in the prophecy is the prediction of a spiritual eclipse, a moment when the world would feel abandoned. Faith would fracture, and all spiritual institutions would lose their authority. But the text insists this collapse is not the end, it is the reset. And the key to surviving it is understanding the forgotten prophecy itself. Without it, the world would misinterpret the signs and fall into fear. With it, the prophecy says, the faithful will know exactly what is coming. Scholars who finally translated the Ethiopian manuscripts were stunned by how precise the imagery is. It describes a global era of disinformation, where false revelations overshadow the true one. It warns that many would preach the end, but only one message would match the pattern revealed to the ancient scribes. That message, the prophecy claims, would emerge from Ethiopia when the world needed clarity most. And today, those manuscripts are finally crossing borders, languages, and cultures for the first time. Perhaps the most controversial section predicts that the spiritual center of the final age would shift, not permanently to Ethiopia, but to a place described as the land of remembering, where the lost texts are uncovered and restored. This suggests the prophecy is not about geography, but about who holds the knowledge. It implies that nations will rise or fall, not by power, but by whether they embrace or reject the ancient message that was hidden for centuries. The prophecy also describes a sudden global awakening, triggered not by miracles but by manuscripts. It claims that when the forgotten texts are read again, the sleep of nations will end, and humanity will face a choice: return to the original covenant or continue the shadow age. Ethiopia preserved these texts for this moment, believing God would reveal the appointed time when the world was ready to receive them. and by all indications, that moment is now. In its final chapters, the prophecy explains why it had to be removed from the Western canon. It says that the message would only reveal its meaning in a time when technology allowed forgotten scriptures to spread across the earth instantly. Before that era, the prophecy would have been misunderstood, twisted, or weaponized. But today, in a world connected by screens and servers, the message can reach millions in its pure form, exactly as the ancient scribes intended. The prophecy ends with a warning and a promise. The warning, that nations will resist this revelation because it undermines centuries of doctrine built without it. The promise, that those who embrace the forgotten message will see the world as it truly is a world, suspended between silence and awakening. The prophecy does not predict destruction, but restoration, not chaos, but clarity. And it insists that the end is not a moment of fear, but a return to the voice humanity once heard openly. Now, as the Ethiopian manuscripts spread across the world and scholars race to translate every surviving fragment, the question becomes unavoidable. Why did early Christianity hide this prophecy, and why is it returning now? The answer may lie in the text's closing words, a line that has echoed across centuries of secrecy. When this message returns to the nations, the silence will break. If this is true, then humanity stands at the threshold of something vast, ancient, and inevitable. The prophecy that survived only in Ethiopia is more than a forgotten scripture. It is a mirror. It reflects a world unprepared for the truth and a future built on rediscovery. Whether the world chooses to listen is uncertain. But one thing is undeniable. The message that was buried for 2,000 years has resurfaced. And according to the ancient scribes, the moment it reappears marks the beginning of a new age, one humanity was never meant to face without it.